The station never slept, and neither did its cruelty. Kiravel pressed her thin body against the cold metal wall of the maintenance corridor and tried to make herself smaller than she already was. Her skin, which should have glowed with the beautiful blue light of her people, flickered weakly like a dying star. She hated how it betrayed her fear to anyone who cared to look. But nobody ever looked at her with kindness anymore. Orbital Station Varinthos 9 stretched across the void of space, like a massive metal flower with hundreds of docking petals. Thousands of beings from dozens of species walked its corridors every single day. They came to trade and negotiate and forge alliances. They came seeking fortune and adventure and new beginnings. Kiravel had come here seeking none of those things. She had been left here like unwanted cargo 7 years ago when she was barely more than a child. The Silithri were known across the entire galaxy as the most graceful and elegant species in existence. Their bodies glowed with soft bioluminescence that shifted with their emotions. But their true gift was far more precious than mere beauty. Every Silithri could sense the emotions of those around them. They could feel joy and sorrow and anger and love radiating from other beings like heat from a sun. This empathic ability made them perfect diplomats and counselors and mediators. Every Silithri possessed this gift. Every Silithri except Kiravel. She had been born into silence, where others of her kind felt the constant warm presence of emotion surrounding them. She felt nothing but emptiness. Where others could read the feelings of any being with a single glance, she was blind. Her family had tried everything. Healers and scientists and even mystics had examined her. They had poked and prodded and scanned every part of her brain. Nothing worked. Nothing could fix what was broken inside her. Her mother had wept. Her father had grown cold and distant. Her siblings had stopped speaking to her altogether. Among a species that communicated through shared emotion, Kiravel was deaf and mute at the same time. Being near her felt wrong to other Silithri. They described it as standing next to a black hole that swallowed all feeling. So they had brought her to this station and left her behind. She still remembered her mother's face as the ship pulled away from the docking port. There had been no tears that day, only relief. Her family had finally freed themselves from the burden of her existence. 7 years she had survived in the lower decks of Varinthos 9. 7 years of scavenging for food and sleeping in forgotten storage rooms. 7 years of other species crossing the corridor to avoid walking near her. The Silithri had spread word of her defect. They had warned others that she was cursed and that her condition might be contagious. It was a lie, of course. But lies traveled faster than truth in the darkness between stars. Now she worked whatever job she could find. Cleaning waste recyclers and scrubbing carbon deposits from air filters and hauling cargo that was too dirty for machines. The pay was almost nothing, but it kept her alive. Barely. The sound of heavy footsteps made her freeze in place. 3 Kreth mercenaries emerged from a side corridor and blocked her path forward. The Kreth were massive beings with thick gray skin and 4 arms that ended in hands like industrial clamps. They worked as muscle for hire on stations like this one. Their leader, a scarred brute named Torek, smiled with a mouthful of yellow teeth. "There she is," Torek growled. "The little ghost girl who thinks she can walk through our territory without paying." Kiravel's light flickered wildly as fear surged through her. "I have no money," she whispered. "I already gave you everything I had last cycle." "Then you should have earned more," another Kreth laughed. "Protection costs credits, little thing. If you cannot pay in credits, then maybe you can pay in other ways." The third Kreth cracked his massive knuckles, and the sound echoed through the corridor like breaking bones. Kiravel looked around desperately. Other beings were passing by the corridor entrance. She could see a pair of Velthri merchants and a group of Hanix engineers and even a Silithri diplomat who glanced her way and immediately looked elsewhere. Please, she called out. Someone help me. The Valkyrie walked faster. The Hannix pretended not to hear. The Silithri diplomat actually sneered before disappearing around a corner. Nobody would help her. Nobody ever helped her. She was the cursed one and the broken one and the empty one. She was nothing to anyone. Torak grabbed her arm with crushing force. No more delays, he snarled. You'd come with us now, and we will figure out how you can work off your debt. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and her glow dimmed almost to nothing. Then a new voice cut through the corridor like a blade. Let her go. Everyone turned. A figure stood at the far end of the corridor with the station lights behind him, casting his features in shadow. He was tall and broad-shouldered, and wore a battered jacket that had seen better days. His face was marked with scars, and his eyes were cold. A human. Torak laughed. Walk away, ape. This does not concern you. The human stepped closer, and his boots rang against the metal floor. I said let her go. She is coming with me. You know this creature? Torak asked with disbelief. She is with me, the human repeated. His hand moved to rest on something at his hip, and Caravel saw the glint of a weapon. Now you have a choice. You can release her and walk away with all your arms still attached. Or you can test how fast I can draw. The Kreth mercenaries looked at each other. Humans had a reputation in the galaxy. They were strange and unpredictable, and sometimes foolish beyond belief. But they were also fierce fighters who did not know when to quit. Many species had learned the hard way that humans would charge into battles. They could not possibly win and somehow emerge victorious. Torak released Caravel's arm and stepped back. Fine, he spat. Keep the defective creature. She's not worth the trouble. The three Kreth retreated into the shadows, and their heavy footsteps faded away. Caravel stood trembling in the middle of the corridor. She stared at the human who had just saved her without any reason she could understand. Her people had taught her that every species acted from self-interest. Every being wanted something in return for their actions. What could this human possibly want from her? He walked closer, and she flinched. But he only looked at her with an expression she could not read. Are you hurt? He asked. She shook her head slowly. Good, he said. He turned and began walking away. You should find somewhere safe to stay. Those Kreth will come back eventually. Desperation seized her heart. She had nowhere to go and no one to turn to, and this strange human had shown her more kindness in one moment than she had received in 7 years. Wait, she called out. Her voice cracked. Please wait. He stopped and looked back at her. Caravel fell to her knees. Her glow pulsed weakly with colors she could not control. I have nothing, she said. No home and no family and no future. Everyone has abandoned me. Everyone. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. Will you be my savior? The human stared at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his scarred face. Something that might have been recognition or memory, or perhaps just exhaustion. Come on, he finally said. My ship is this way. He did not answer her question, but he did not walk away either. And for Caravel, that was enough. The ship was called the Second Chance, and it was the most beautiful thing Caravel had ever seen. It was not beautiful in the way most beings would understand. The hull was scratched and dented and patched in dozens of places. The paint had faded to a color that might once have been blue, but was now closer to gray. One of the engine housings had been replaced with a part that clearly came from a different vessel. But to Caravel, it was beautiful because it represented something she had forgotten existed. Hope. Captain Marcus Cole led her through the cargo bay and up a narrow stairway to the main living quarters. He moved with the careful walk of someone who had been hurt many times and had learned to protect himself. Caravel followed in silence and tried to make herself as small and unnoticeable as possible. The common area was cramped but clean. A table with mismatched chairs sat in the center, and screens on the walls displayed star maps and cargo manifests. The smell of recycled air mixed with something that might have been cooking food. Two other beings looked up as they entered. The first was a human male with dark skin and grease-stained hands. His eyes narrowed when he saw Kiravel. "Captain," he said slowly, "what exactly did you bring onto my ship?" "Your ship?" Marcus replied. "Last time I checked, Jux, I was still making the payments." "I keep it running, so it might as well be mine," Jux grumbled. He pointed at Kiravel. "That is a Silithary. Do you know what kind of trouble they bring?" "She needed help," Marcus said simply. "Everyone needs help. That does not mean we have to give it." The second person stood up from her chair. She was a human woman with gray streaks in her black hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She wore a medical coat that had been washed so many times the white had turned cream-colored. "Ignore Jax," she said warmly. "He complains about everything, including his own breakfast. I am Dr. Yemisi Adaini. You may call me Doc if you prefer." Kiravel bowed her head in the traditional Silithary greeting. "I am Kiravel," she whispered. "I thank you for allowing me on your vessel." "Allowing is a strong word," Jax muttered. A new voice emerged from speakers in the ceiling. "I have completed my scan of our guest. She carries no weapons and no tracking devices and no contagious pathogens. She is, however, severely malnourished and showing signs of chronic stress." Kiravel looked around in confusion. "That is Oracle," Marcus explained. "Our ship's artificial intelligence. It runs most of the systems and also provides commentary that nobody asked for." "I provide valuable observations," Oracle replied. "It is not my fault that organic beings rarely appreciate wisdom." Doc walked over to Kiravel and gently took her hand. "Come with me to the medical bay. I want to examine you properly and get some food into you. When was the last time you had a real meal?" Kiravel tried to remember. 3 days ago, she admitted. "I found some discarded rations near the waste processing level." Doc's expression tightened with anger that Kiravel did not understand. Why would this stranger be angry about her hunger? 3 days, Doc repeated. "Well, that ends now. Marcus, I am taking her. We will talk later about why exactly you decided to rescue a Silithary from the lower decks." She led Kiravel away before anyone could respond. The medical bay was small but filled with equipment that looked far more advanced than Kiravel expected. Doc helped her onto a bed and began running scans while a machine in the wall produced a container of warm soup. "Eat slowly," Doc warned. "Your stomach will not handle too much at once." Kiravel took the soup with trembling hands. The first sip was the most wonderful thing she had ever tasted. Warmth spread through her body, and her glow actually brightened for a moment before flickering back to its usual dim state. "Why are you helping me?" Kiravel asked. "You do not know me. I cannot pay you. I have nothing to offer." Doc paused her work and looked at Kiravel with an expression of deep sadness. "Is that what you believe? That help must always be purchased?" "That is how the galaxy works," Kiravel said. "Every species taught me this. The Velthari trade favors. The Kreth demand payment. Even my own people only gave love to those who could feel it in return." "Humans are different," Doc said softly. "Not all of us, and not all the time. But many of us believe that helping others is simply the right thing to do. We do not need a reason beyond that." Kiravel could not understand this. It went against everything she had learned in her years of survival. There had to be a catch. There was always a catch. Over the following days, Kiravel waited for the truth to reveal itself. She waited for Marcus to demand something from her. She waited for Doc to present a bill. She waited for Jax to throw her off the ship. Instead, something strange happened. They simply let her stay. Kiravel could not accept this kindness without giving something in return. Her guilt and her fear and her desperate need to prove her worth drove her to work harder than she had ever worked before. She cleaned every surface of the ship until it gleamed. She organized the cargo bay and memorized the inventory. She learned how the food systems worked and began preparing meals for the crew. When Jax complained about a malfunctioning panel, she spent 6 hours fixing it herself. When Oracle mentioned that the air filters needed replacement, she handled it before anyone else could respond. When Doc fell asleep at her desk after a long shift, Caravel covered her with a blanket and dimmed the lights. She worked until her body ached and her glow faded to almost nothing. One evening, Marcus found her scrubbing the floor of the common area at a time when everyone else was sleeping. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Working," she replied without stopping. "I must earn my place here. I must prove that I am useful." Marcus knelt down and took the cleaning tool from her hands. "Stop," he said firmly. Fear flooded through her. This was it. She had failed somehow, and now he would send her away. "You have cleaned this floor 3 times today," Marcus said. "You have not slept in almost 40 hours. You're going to collapse if you keep this up." "But I must earn my place," she protested. "If I do not work, then why would you keep me?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Softer and heavier, with something Caravel could not identify. "I had a daughter once," he said. "She died in an accident when I could not save her. I joined the military after that. I thought fighting would help me forget. Instead, it just added more ghosts to the ones already following me." Caravel did not know what to say. "You asked me a question back on the station," Marcus continued. "You asked if I would be your savior. I did not answer because I do not think I can save anyone. I could not save my daughter. I could not save my crew when a mission went wrong. I am just a broken man flying a broken ship through the void." He looked at her with eyes that held more pain than she had ever seen. "But maybe that is exactly why I stopped for you. Maybe that is exactly why I stopped for you. Maybe broken things understand each other. You do not have to earn your place here, Caravel. You do not have to prove anything. Just stay alive. That is enough." Caravel felt something crack inside her chest. Something that had been frozen for 7 years began to melt. A glow pulsed with uncertain light. "Thank you," she whispered. Marcus stood and offered her his hand. "Now go get some sleep. That is an order from your captain." For the first time in longer than she could remember, Caravel smiled. The message arrived 3 weeks after Caravel joined the crew of the Second Chance. Oracle displayed it on the main screen without warning, and the words burned themselves into Caravel's memory. To the human vessel designated Second Chance. "You are harboring a citizen of the Salithri Enclave who requires immediate medical treatment. Return the individual known as Caravel to the nearest Salithri embassy within 10 standard days. Failure to comply will result in severe consequences. By order of the High Enclave." Caravel felt her blood turn to ice. Her glow dimmed to almost nothing, and her legs gave out beneath her. She collapsed onto the floor of the common area as Doc rushed to her side. "What does this mean?" Marcus demanded. "What treatment?" Caravel could barely speak. The words came out in broken whispers. "They want to fix me. They said they could not fix me before, but they must have found a way. They will take me back, and they will fix me." "That sounds like a good thing," Jack said slowly. "Is it not a good thing?" "You do not understand," Caravel sobbed. "Treatment means neural reconditioning. They will burn away everything that makes me who I am. They will erase my memories, and my personality, and my very self. What comes out of that process will wear my face, but it will not be me." Horror spread across the faces of the humans. "They would do that to one of their own?" Doc asked. "I am not one of their own," Caravel replied. I never was. I am a mistake, a defect, an embarrassment to the perfect Silithri species. They would rather destroy my mind than allow me to exist among other beings. My existence proves that they are not as perfect as they claim to be. Marcus stared at the message on the screen. His jaw tightened and his hands clenched into fists. Oracle, delete that message. Captain, I must advise that ignoring an official Silithri demand could have serious consequences for... Delete it. The message vanished from the screen. Curavel looked up at Marcus with disbelief. You cannot do this. The Silithri are powerful. They have allies across the galaxy. If you refuse their demand, they will make your life impossible. Let them try, Marcus said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were burning. No one is taking you anywhere. Not while I am captain of this ship. Marcus, Jock stepped forward with concern on his face. Think about what you are doing. We are just freight haulers. We cannot fight the Silithri Enclave. I am not asking you to fight anyone, but I am not handing over a member of my crew to be mind-wiped. A member of your crew? Jocks repeated. She has been here 3 weeks. That is 3 weeks longer than anyone else gave her. The room fell silent. Jocks opened his mouth to argue further, but something in Marcus's expression made him stop. Doc stood up and crossed her arms. I am with the captain. Medical ethics alone forbid me from allowing a patient to be subjected to forced neural reconditioning. That practice was outlawed in human space centuries ago. Oracle? Marcus asked. I find the concept of erasing a consciousness deeply troubling, the AI admitted. I may be artificial, but I still value my own existence. I would not wish such a fate on any thinking being. Everyone looked at Jocks. The mechanic threw his hands up in frustration. Fine. I suppose I will just die in the cold void of space alongside the rest of you. At least the ship will be clean when the Silithri find our frozen bodies. Despite everything, Curavel almost laughed. But the danger was real, and it found them faster than anyone expected. The first bounty hunters appeared 2 days later. A pair of Velfari trackers ambushed them at a fuel station, and Marcus barely escaped with a blast wound in his shoulder. Doc patched him up while cursing in 3 different languages. After that, the attacks became constant. Kreth mercenaries cornered them at a supply depot. Hanix pirates chased them through an asteroid field. A mysterious vessel with no identification stalked them for 6 hours before breaking off pursuit. Trade stations began refusing to let them dock. Suppliers canceled their contracts. Old friends stopped returning their calls. The Silithri Enclave was spreading word across the galaxy that the Second Chance was a criminal vessel, harboring a dangerous fugitive. We are running out of options, Jocks announced after another failed docking request. We have fuel for maybe 2 more weeks and food for less than that. If we cannot resupply soon, we are finished. Curavel stood in the corner of the bridge with her glow completely dark. She had caused this. She had brought destruction to the only beings who had ever shown her kindness. This is my fault, she said quietly. You should turn me over to the Enclave. It is the only way. No, Marcus replied without hesitation. But you are suffering because of me. Marcus turned from his console and looked at her. You asked me a question once. You asked if I would be your savior. I did not answer then because I did not know what I was getting into. I did not know if I could commit to something like that. He walked toward her with pain in his shoulder and exhaustion in his eyes, but determination in every step. I am answering now. Yes, I will be your savior. Not because I think I am a hero. Not because I think I can fix everything. But because giving you up would mean giving up on everything I believe in. And I have already given up on too much in my life. Curavel felt tears streaming down her face. The final battle came near a dead moon in the Fringwood sectors. 3 bounty hunter vessels surrounded the Second Chance and demanded surrender. Marcus fought back with every weapon the old freighter possessed. Jax pushed the engines beyond their limits. Doc prepared the medical bay for casualties they all knew were coming. The fight was brutal and desperate and beautiful in its defiance. When it was over, the second chance was crippled and drifting. One engine was destroyed, and the hull was breached in 3 places. Marcus lay bleeding on the deck with new wounds covering his old scars. But the bounty hunters were gone. 2 ships destroyed, and 1 fleeing into the void. They had won. Barely. Impossibly. They had won. Kiravel knelt beside Marcus and pressed her hands against his wounds. Doc was already working on him, but there was so much blood. So much damage. Stay with me, Kiravel begged. Please stay with me. She did not know what she was doing. She only knew that she wanted him to feel what she felt. She wanted him to know how much he meant to her. She wanted to give him something in return for everything he had given. And then something impossible happened. Her skin began to glow. Not the weak flickering light she had known her entire life. This was something new. Something warm and golden and powerful. It pulsed from her body in waves and washed over Marcus like sunshine. His breathing steadied. His trembling stopped. His eyes opened and focused on her face. "What are you doing?" he whispered. Kiravel had no answer. She did not understand what was happening. She only knew that for the first time in her life she was not empty. She was full, and that fullness was pouring out of her and into the people she loved. The Galactic Council chamber was the largest room Kiravel had ever seen. It stretched upward for hundreds of meters, with tiers of seats carved from stone and metal and crystal. Representatives from every major species in the known galaxy filled those seats. Thousands of eyes looked down at the small group standing in the center of the floor. Kiravel stood between Marcus and Doc with her wrists bound by energy cuffs. Jax remained on the crippled second chance under guard. Oracle had been forcibly disconnected. They had been captured 3 days after the battle near the Dead Moon. A Scyldry warship had found them drifting and helpless. There had been no escape and no way to fight. Now they faced judgment before the highest authority in the galaxy. The Scyldry High Speaker stood at an elevated podium. She was tall and elegant, and her bioluminescence glowed with perfect blue light that pulsed in harmony with her words. Her name was Velanthra, and she was considered the finest diplomat in Scyldry history. This tribunal has convened to address the matter of the human vessel Second Chance and its criminal harboring of a Scyldry citizen, Velanthra announced. Her voice echoed through the massive chamber. The evidence is clear. The humans have kidnapped a vulnerable member of our species who requires urgent medical treatment. That is a lie, Marcus said. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Interrupting a high speaker was considered a grave offense. Velanthra's glow flickered with barely contained anger. The human will be silent. You do not understand our ways. You do not understand what this creature represents. She is not a creature. Her name is Kiravel, and I understand perfectly what you want to do to her. We wish only to help her, to cure her defect, to restore her to wholeness, by erasing her mind. Marcus stepped forward, and 2 guards moved to restrain him, but he shook them off. You call it treatment, but it is murder. You would kill the person she is and replace her with someone else. That is not medicine. That is execution. The chamber erupted in chaos. Dozens of species began talking at once. Some expressed outrage at the human's words. Others demanded proof. A few simply watched in silent fascination. The head of the council, an ancient Velthari known as First Mind Kareth, raised one appendage for silence. Order. There will be order. The human will explain his accusations. I am not the one who will explain, Marcus replied. Dr. Adami has discovered something that this council needs to hear. All eyes turned to Doc. She looked pale and tired from days of captivity, but her spine was straight and her voice was strong. With respect to the Council, I have spent the last several months studying Kiravel's condition. I am a xenobiologist with specialization in neurological systems. What I have found changes everything we know about her supposed defect. The human doctor does not have access to salivary medical knowledge, Valanthra interrupted. She cannot possibly understand. I accessed your medical databases during one of our docking attempts, Doc said calmly. Your encryption was quite sophisticated, but not sophisticated enough. What I found was disturbing. She produced a small data chip and held it up for the chamber to see. Kiravel is not broken. She is not defective. She is an evolutionary advancement that the Silithri have been hiding and destroying for centuries. The silence that followed was absolute. Doc continued. Standard Silithri possess empathic reception. They can sense the emotions of those around them. This makes them excellent diplomats because they always know what others are feeling. But Kiravel's brain developed differently. Instead of receiving emotions, she can project them. That is impossible, Valanthra said, but her glow had begun to flicker with uncertainty. It is not only possible, it is documented. I found records of hundreds of Silithri born with this ability throughout your history. Every single one was subjected to neural reconditioning. Every single one had their consciousness erased. You called it treatment, but the truth is you were terrified of what they represented. First Mind Kareth leaned forward. Explain this terror, Doctor. The Silithri have built their entire civilization on being passive receivers of emotion. They listen and feel and interpret. The projective empaths like Kiravel can do something far more powerful. They can share their own emotions across species barriers. They can create understanding between beings who could never understand each other before. Doc pointed at Kiravel. During our battle with the bounty hunters, she projected her emotions into Captain Cole. She did not even know she was doing it. She simply wanted him to survive, and her feelings flowed into him and gave him strength. This is not a defect. This is a gift beyond anything your species has seen in millennia. Then why hide it? First Mind Kareth asked. Because projective empaths challenge Silithri identity, Doc replied. Your people have always been the listeners, the interpreters, the passive observers. A Silithri who can project emotions is active, influential, potentially more powerful than any diplomat in your history. You were not trying to Kiravel. You were trying to suppress a threat to your social order. Valanthra's composure finally cracked. You understand nothing. These aberrations are dangerous. They can manipulate the emotions of entire populations. They could destabilize the balance of power across the galaxy. Or they could heal divisions between species, Marcus said. He stepped forward again, and this time no one tried to stop him. Where I come from, we have a saying. You do not throw away something just because it is different. You do not destroy what you do not understand. You learn from it. He turned to face the assembled council. I am just a freight captain. I have no power and no wealth and no influence. I am broken in more ways than I can count. But I stopped to help a frightened girl in a dark corridor because that is what humans do. We find the outcasts and the forgotten and the abandoned, and we give them a chance. His voice rose until it filled the entire chamber. Kiravel is not a mistake. She is a miracle. She's proof that evolution has not stopped, that the galaxy can still produce something new and wonderful. And you want to destroy her because she makes you uncomfortable? He shook his head. That is not justice. That is cowardice. And every species in this chamber should be ashamed that they almost let it happen. The council deliberated for 6 hours. Representatives argued and debated and consulted ancient laws and modern treaties. The Silithri delegation tried every legal argument they could think of, but the evidence was overwhelming. When First Mind Kareth finally announced the verdict, Caravel could barely breathe. This council finds the charges against the human vessel Second Chance to be unfounded. Furthermore, the practice of neural reconditioning for projective empaths is hereby declared a violation of sentient rights. The individual known as Caravel is free to go where she chooses. Cheers erupted from the human section of the chamber. Caravel collapsed against Marcus and sobbed with relief. Doc held them both while tears ran down her own face. They were free, and the galaxy would never see Caravel as broken again. 1 year had passed since the day the Galactic Council set her free. Caravel stood at the viewport of the Second Chance and watched the stars drift by. Her bioluminescence glowed with warm, steady light that pulsed in gentle waves of gold and blue and soft violet. It was beautiful in a way she had never imagined possible. The ship had been repaired and upgraded with funds from grateful species across the galaxy. New engines hummed with power. Fresh armor plating gleamed where scars had once marked the hull. Oracle had been restored with improved processing cores that he would not stop bragging about. But some things had not changed. Jack still complained about everything. He was currently in the engine room arguing with a calibration system that he insisted was mocking him. Doc was in the medical bay reviewing research notes on Caravel's unique abilities. Somewhere in the cargo hold a crate of supplies waited to be delivered to a colony on the edge of explored space. The Second Chance was still a freight vessel. Marcus had refused all offers to turn it into something else. He said that honest work kept a person grounded, and he refused to let fame change who he was. Fame had certainly tried. Recordings of his speech before the council had spread across every communication network in the galaxy. Humans celebrated him as a hero who embodied their finest values. Other species watched in fascination as this scarred freighter captain spoke truths that diplomats had hidden for centuries. Marcus hated the attention. He deleted most of the interview requests without reading them. He turned down offers of money and positions and honors. He said he was not special and that any decent person would have done the same. Caravel knew better. She had lived among dozens of species for years, and she had never met anyone like Marcus Cole. But that was not entirely accurate anymore. She had met Doc, who raged against injustice with every breath. She had met Jocks, who complained constantly, but would die before abandoning his crew. She had met Oracle, who felt emotions he was not supposed to be able to feel. She had met humans, and they had changed her understanding of everything. The door behind her opened, and Marcus walked onto the bridge. He looked different now than he had a year ago. The shadows under his eyes had faded. The weight on his shoulders seemed lighter. He smiled more often, and the smiles reached his eyes. Healing was strange. It happened slowly and then suddenly and then slowly again. Caravel understood this better than most. Could not sleep? Marcus asked. I was watching the stars, she replied. I never tire of looking at them. When I lived in the station, I could only see the ones visible from the lower decks. Now I can see millions. Marcus stood beside her at the viewport. Their reflections overlapped in the transparent material like ghosts of the people they used to be. I have been meaning to ask you something, Marcus said. That night on the station when I found you, you asked if I would be your savior. Do you remember? Of course I remember. It was the most important question I had ever asked. You never told me why you asked that specific question. Why savior? Why not protector or helper or friend? Caravel was quiet for a moment. The memory of that night still carried pain, but the pain had dulled over time. It was part of her now, rather than something that controlled her. Among the Silithri there is an old legend, she said. It tells of beings who come in times of darkness to lift the fallen and guide the lost. We call them saviors. But the legend always spoke of them as Silithri. The idea that a savior could come from another species was considered impossible. She turned to face Marcus. I asked you that question because I had given up. I had no hope left. I was asking the universe one final time if there was any reason to keep living. And then you appeared, a human, the most unlikely savior I could imagine. I did not feel like a savior that night, Marcus admitted. I felt like a tired old man who was too stubborn to walk away. That is exactly what made you the right one. A perfect hero would have saved me and moved on. You stayed. You struggled. You suffered alongside me. That is what made the difference. Marcus looked uncomfortable with her words. He always did when someone praised him. I still do not think I saved you. You did most of the hard work yourself. You gave me the chance to do that work. That is what saving means. It does not mean solving every problem. It means giving someone the opportunity to solve their own problems. She reached out and took his hand. Her glow pulsed brighter, and she let her emotions flow through the connection. Gratitude, belonging, joy, and something deeper that she had only recently learned to name. Marcus gasped softly as her feelings washed over him. His eyes widened and his grip on her hand tightened. What is that? He whispered. That is how I see you, Kiravel replied. That is everything you mean to me. I could not show you before because I did not know how. But now I can share what words could never express. Tears formed in Marcus's eyes. He had spent so many years believing he was broken beyond repair. He had convinced himself that he could never truly connect with another being again. Now he felt Kiravel's truth pouring into him and breaking down every wall he had ever built. I was wrong about something, he said when he could speak again. What were you wrong about? I told you once that I did not save you. I said you saved yourself. But I understand now that it was not that simple. Maybe we saved each other. Kiravel smiled. Maybe saving is never a one-way action. Maybe it always flows both directions. They stood together in comfortable silence and watched the stars. The second chance hummed around them like a living thing. Somewhere behind them, Jocks shouted about a calibration error, and Doc laughed at something Oracle said. This was home. This ragged collection of damaged beings who had found each other across the void. They were not perfect. They were not heroes from legends. They were simply people who refused to give up on each other. I never properly answered your question, Marcus said suddenly. Kiravel looked at him with confusion. What question? Will you be my savior? You asked me that on the station, and I never gave you a real answer. I just told you to follow me. You did not need to answer. Your actions spoke for you. Maybe so, but I want to say the words now. I want you to hear them. He turned to face her fully, and his scarred face was softer than she had ever seen it. Yes, I will be your savior, and you will be mine. And we will keep saving each other for as long as the stars keep burning. Kiravel's glow brightened until it filled the entire bridge with warmth. She let her emotions flow freely, and Marcus felt every shade of her joy. Thank you, she said, for stopping in that corridor, for giving me a chance, for teaching me what humans understand that the rest of the galaxy forgot. What do we understand? She leaned her head against his shoulder and watched the infinite darkness sparkle with light. That broken things are not worthless. They are just waiting for someone stubborn enough to see what they could become. The second chance jumped to hyperspace and carried its family toward the next horizon. And Kiravel finally understood that she had never been empty at all. She had simply been waiting for the right people to fill her up.